On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Opal. And Opal was in a toxic relationship with a grandiose narcissist. It's a story of push-pulls, enmeshed personal and business lives, the fear of failure, and putting your self-worth into someone else's hands. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. This is a podcast that gives a voice to survivors of toxic relationships. I am Brandon Chadwick, but my friends call me Chad, and thanks for tuning into this episode. So what is a narcissist, you may ask? Well, for the purposes of this podcast, we refer to a narcissist as anyone who has displayed a pattern of behavior that shows a limited capacity to appreciate others' perspectives. It is that simple. Now, if you have not been to our website recently and want to be a guest on our show, please go to narcissistapocalypse.com. Top of the page, there's a button that says guest form. Click on that button and away we will go from there. And we are also accumulating, I can never say that properly, I'm not going to even try. I'll try. We are accumulating, what's wrong with me today? Anyway, We're collecting these letters for our Letters to My Narcissist compilation episode. And you can also go to narcissistapocalypse.com to, I have no idea what I'm even saying anymore. Let me just start back from the beginning. Another way to be part of the show is to, I'm acting weird today. Another way to be part of our show is to go to narcissistapocalypse.com and be part of our Letters to My Narcissist compilation episode. So if you want to read a letter to your narcissist, go to narcissistapocalypse.com. Side of the page, there is a button that says send voicemail. Click that button, records up to 5 minutes. Click it twice, records up to 10. We are accumulating these letters for a volume 6 of that episode. And if you do not want to read the letter yourself and you want me or my old pal Melissa to read the letter for you, just please send it to narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com and put Letters to My Narcissist in the subject line. And everyone, if you want to support our show, we have a Patreon. And our Patreon is where we have extra episodes that never made it to air, follow-up episodes with former guests. We also have on there virtual support groups through Zoom every Wednesday and Saturday night. We also have our own support forum page. And we are releasing content on there every week, every 2 weeks. And if you want to help support the show, please do become a patron of our Patreon at patreon.com/narcissistapocalypse. And about the Patreon, in about a month's time, we were going to be switching from our Patreon over to another platform, and we will be creating our own social network. And it'll be a community-based network, and it is beautiful looking. We're working on it right now. It's going to be really immersive, and we're going to be on there supporting each other, helping each other out. We're still building it out a little, and you won't just be able to connect with people through, your shared trauma. We're all going to be making friends on there, and you'll be able to find people through other types of subjects that you'll like. It's coming along really nicely, and, I'll keep you up to date of what's going on. But September 1st, we're going to be moving everything. It's going to be a brand new world, and I hope everyone comes to join us at that time. So just kind of putting it out there for everyone. And I also want to say that, we're also, working on a shoestring budget to put this show together. So we started to do sponsorships for our show, and people have been sponsoring because we have support services and we're growing, and it's all coming out of my pocket, so it's becoming more difficult as time goes on. So thank you so much to the people that have donated to the show so far, and if you want to consider donating to the cause to help grow our support services, to reach a larger audience and help more people, sponsoring an episode of this podcast is a big way to make a big difference for so many people. You're going to help thousands and thousands of people, so thank you so much for considering it, thinking about it, and for the people that have. And this week's episode was sponsored by Ryan. And I just want to say a big thank you to Ryan for doing this. And, I'm forever grateful. Everyone is. Your generosity it knows no bounds. So thank you so much from me and everyone listening. You helped change so many people's lives. And thank you, thank you, thank you. So if you want to support our show and be a sponsor of our show, like Ryan did this week, like JJ did last week, and like Fern did the week before that, please do email me at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com, and we'll discuss everything and go from there. And before we begin this episode with Opal, I just want to kind of talk about this episode because it was a really interesting episode, not just for Opal to tell her story, but it was also interesting for me as well. And I say that because, this episode and what we do here, what I do, for the most part, everyone else does a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm just listening. And, when it comes to telling stories, it's not easy for someone to come onto this podcast and tell their story. It's, it might sound easy. Some people might even be critical of the people that have told their stories, but it's not something that is easy to do. And people are telling their stories sometimes for the very first time. And, I'm also guilty sometimes. Sometimes I do kind of get frustrated here or there when we're trying to do recordings and things aren't going well. And sometimes I even show a lack of patience, and it makes me have to be better. And this was an episode this week where I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my shortcomings as well. And, Opal came here to be on this show, and she told me beforehand, that there's going to be some coaxing that was kind of needed. And we went through, I think, about 45 minutes, and things just weren't working. And it was hard for me to kind of put my finger on what was going on. And, we started from scratch after we recorded the first 45 minutes. We started pretty much right at the beginning again. We might have kept like 10 minutes in from the beginning. But we started brand new. And, eventually we got onto a groove. And it took a while to get there. And Opal was patient with me. And I want to thank Opal for being patient with, my craziness over here. And I learned a lot. And I think this is a really interesting episode. I'm in there a bit more. We discover a lot. And it's more of a back and forth compared to most episodes. And I really want to thank Opal. You'll hear me say later that Opal brought the best. I felt she brought the best out of me. And, sometimes I guess when I'm doing this, I can get lazy. And sometimes depending on the hour of the day, I might be tired when doing a recording, because sometimes I do a lot of stuff during the day. And, so I just really want to thank Opal. And that's pretty much it. So for everyone, this is one of my favorite episodes, mainly because I think Opal grew a little bit during it. I did as well, and I really hope you enjoy this, and I hope you enjoyed the backstory of how we got here. So from Opal, thank you, and me, thank you. Everyone who's listening, thank you for listening. And now, without further ado, here is my episode with Opal. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. With me today, I have Opal. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Brandon?
I am doing well, and we chatted for a little bit. We got to know each other a little. I'm happy you are here with me today. It's unfortunate that you are here with me today, and today you are going to tell us the story of your first relationship with a narcissist. You had two, and we're going to hear the first one. Obviously, there's a point of this relationship. Obviously, I say there's a point in this relationship where you eventually do have a relationship with someone else, and then you go back to your partner. But just so it's not confusing for everyone, that we kind of get this out of the way, just in case at first. And, you dealt with a lot of psychological and emotional abuse, and you're still here with us today. You're going to tell your story. You're going to help a lot of people. And I'm thanking you for being here. And now, without further ado, Opal, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much for the chance to be here and to share my story, as so many of the stories that I've been listening to from other people have helped me along the way so much. So even though it's not very easy to be the teller, I feel like I want to try to pitch my story into the pile so that hopefully it could help somebody else. My story really starts, I think, from my childhood, as most of us probably know by now. Our personalities form early, and there are things that I look back on now from my younger years that definitely set me on a path that eventually attracted my first and then second narcissistic relationship into my life. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about that recently. And I should say that my relationships, plural, with these two people took place over the course of about 5 years. A first relationship, then a second with a new narcissist, and then another relationship with the original. And so there were a lot of years there where I struggled to find meaning. And so in the time since my no contact with my narcissist, which I'm happy to say is now in the 280-something days of no contact, I've had a lot of time to think about things. And I want to try to share some of those thoughts. My childhood was really quiet. It was in a very sleepy little town, and I was able to explore myself creatively. I'm a creative person professionally now as an adult, but I was as a child as well. I was very introspective and thoughtful, bookish. I read all the time, maybe a little bit of a introvert. And I remember from the beginning really wanting to be a part of things, wanting to be part of the group of kids at school, really wanting to be liked by the other kids and ideally have a place. And I remember noticing really early on whether or not someone wanted to sit next to me on the bus was really important. I would have, a couple of kids that I really wanted to be friends with, and I remember really worrying about whether I would be liked enough at school to be their friends. And there was some, false starts there. I remember there were girls that didn't like me and would pick on me, and I would sort of feel really small. And I think as early as that, in my life anyway, I started to see those things happening as being a sign of flaws in myself. Not that someone else was acting in the way that they wanted to and couldn't help doing, but just that it was a sign that I wasn't really the way I wanted to be, and I would try harder. And that really continued, I think, for most of my childhood. I was always working extra hard to be extra perfect, I think is a good way to say it. And tried really hard to be helpful to my family. I was the oldest of two children, So I think I grew up quickly in wanting to be a serious older child that was always listening to the things my parents would be saying and whatever they worried about, and thinking, how can I be helpful? How can I solve that problem for them, even though I was little? And I don't think they knew that I was thinking those things. But still, I think that's the stuff that was running through my head from a young age. And the other thing that I have remembered since recently, looking back on my childhood, is that my really close relationship with my grandfather was a really formative experience for me. And I would sit and listen for hours on end to stories about his great escapades and his amazing adventures. And he had such a idealized, romantic view of his life. He told stories with reverence about things that had happened to him and places he had been and things he had accomplished. And it was a little more grandiose than the real version of that probably happened, but it was painted in such a beautiful way that it fit with my fairy tale way of thinking that I was building in my mind. And I would love listening to these tales. And in retrospect, I now look back and I say to myself, those were the first times that I learned the language of idealizing someone in their own words. He was self-idealizing. He was creating a fantasy version of his past, and he was telling me because I was a captive audience, and I would just lap it up, and I would be desperate to be the most perfect granddaughter I could be, and as a result, I was the golden child. I was the favorite of, there was probably 20 of us grandchildren, and I had that special place because I was always the one who would listen, and I would absorb everything he said and hang on every word. So looking back, I think those things really had significance when I think about my adult relationships with narcissists. It's amazing how even loving people who don't abuse you in ways that other people might recognize are unwittingly perhaps planting seeds for things that can grow into bigger problems down the road. And certainly I think that's what happened for me.
So when it comes to your whole childhood up to, let's say, 18 years old, you become a bit of a perfectionist. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
And you struggle with being good enough. So you also become a people pleaser. And I guess besides being a people pleaser, you have this, I guess, idea of what maybe relationships should be, or a belief system of what life should be like, or what you want out of things. And, in the notes that you sent me, you used the word Disney. And, as a model for a lot of kids growing up, there are these Disneyfications, if that is that a word? Did I say it properly? Of life and of what is to be expected of relationship in these, and eventually see them in romantic comedies a lot, where, you're supposed to forgive like these people in these romantic comedies, even though these horrible things happened. A lot of them where you're duped, and in Disney, you're romanticizing this fantasy of life and what a relationship and a Prince Charming and all of these types of things. So is that playing another kind of role as far as the influences of this fantasy world? Does that make sense? Am I off a little here or no?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. My cultural upbringing as, part of the Western world, I think probably is one of similarities to many, especially us girls growing up, where we do get so many over-idealized images. And in my own family, beyond the Disney princesses I saw on television, I heard supposedly firsthand accounts of the fairy tale being real for my grandparents, according to my grandfather. Now, if you had asked his adult children to tell you how did that marriage really go, they wouldn't have painted the picture quite the way that my grandfather liked to tell the story. But he absolutely, in his later years, it was really important to him to share the legend of his life, literally the legend of it. And that really felt like fact to me at the time. And he would always end the story with, "I hope you're lucky enough to live a life like mine." And so I think I set about trying not to screw it up, get everything perfect so that you can live a legendary life too. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's a big setup.
That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, and then I'm going to assume a lot of shame as far as when things aren't going well, because you've given yourself an impossible thing to live up to.
Exactly. You think this is confirmation that there's still something wrong with me. That's the same something wrong with me that made that girl not want to sit next to me on the bus. It must be that even though everybody else knows how to do this perfectly, there's something wrong with me.
So I guess that leads us into, you meeting this first person. And, I guess before you met him, what were your relationships like before? Did you have any relationships before? And, quickly, like how did they go?
Yeah. So I did have lots of relationships, and they were generally longer-term relationships for my age. So throughout, middle school, high school, college, I was more often in a relationship than not, and they generally tended to be at least 9 months, a year and a half, sometimes a few years. I was always romantic going in, and I was also really attentive. And so as long as I kept meeting people who were fairly nice to me and available, I poured myself into it, and I probably made a great girlfriend. I was really attentive and always, trying to make them feel special, because that's my go-to thing to connect with somebody. I want to make them feel good. And that's a part of what made me also such an attractive candidate eventually to the narcissist that came down the pike. But when I met that person, I had already a basis of lots of normal relationships before that point.
So where did you meet this person for the first time?
So I meet my narc for the first time at work. I've just taken an incredible design job. It's the job of my dreams. I'm in a city working for a designer I respect so much, and I'm working at this firm, and he's hired, and he's a fellow designer. He's the most exotic, foreign, wonderful accent, well-dressed, very unusual person at this design firm, and everybody notices him. He's the star. He has the highest number of clients. He's the most successful, and he's working relentlessly. He's a tiger at his job. And I am just maybe number two. I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, he's amazing. He's 10 years older. He's been all over the place. He knows all of the things that I wish I knew about being an amazing designer. And so I have a lot of professional respect for him, but we really don't have a lot of personal contact. He kind of maintains his distance. I do my thing. He does his. And it isn't actually until I leave this firm to take the chance to move out of state with my husband. I'm married at this time, and start a new life and launch my own design firm. And that's actually the moment when our previous professional relationship rekindles and he starts getting back in touch. So I I'm working hard, starting this design firm out of, from nowhere, from nothing, in a spare bedroom. I'm starting this business just all by myself. And I get text messages from him. How are you doing? What's going on? How's everything going? He's really curious. He wants to hear. And I tell him how it's going. I'm flattered that he's staying in touch. To me, it feels like, why is he even paying attention to me? I'm out of state. I was, just a lowly, he never noticed me much before. Why is he in touch now? But he was curious. He was surprisingly curious about what was going on. And I would tell him, and I would tell him about the ups and the downs. And as I go along and I'm building this new business, I'm actually starting to see it work. And I'm getting busy. Clients are coming in. All of a sudden I can't figure out how to keep up. I've got more clients than I know what to do with. I'm tearing my hair out some days. I think, oh my gosh, I'm getting buried. I don't think I can keep up all by myself. What am I going to do? And so, he hears some of this from his, texts back and forth with me. And I can tell that I have his attention, and he's ready and waiting and ready to help. He wants to work part-time. He wants to, spend time on nights and weekends. I can help you out. I can work, I can moonlight with you while I still have my job here. It'll be great. You're so talented, he says to me. You're so wonderful. You're going to be amazing, but I just don't think that you have enough hours in the day. You're going to need, me. And so I latch onto this. I'm thinking this is great. I don't know where this is headed yet, but this company seems to be taking off. It would be great if I had your expertise. You're so much more advanced and in years in the career than I am, and I'm looking up to him still. So I'm thinking, how lucky am I that he's offered this to me? He's going to work, alongside me to make this happen.
So here's a moment where you are struggling. He comes in kind of as a savior to you.
Oh, absolutely.
You're taking all of that in. You don't want to fail at all, so to bring him in this way. And you bring him in because he's also flattering you, and he's stroking your ego in a lot of ways, and he's building you up at the same time. So,
yep.
That's kind of going on. So he's able to wrangle himself back into your life. And, while this is going on, from our notes that we had before, as things are going well for you, things aren't going well for your husband who has moved, and he's fallen into a depression of sorts, and it's something you have a difficult time with because you don't understand it, and you guys your marriage starts to get a little bit rocky here. So you can explain, how your marriage gets a little bit rocky, and then at the same time, how this abuser that has come into your life starts feeding that a little bit more, and what kind of love bombing as well and trust building is going on at the same time while all that is happening. Because, there's a triangulation kind of going on here, and it's like an unhealthy situation for you. Your husband doesn't know that this guy's like barking in your ear, and it's affecting everything. So can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think he had met my husband, I think once, maybe twice, in very brief situations before we had moved away. So at least he knew him enough to kind of get a 5-second take on him. And I don't think he ever missed an opportunity to remind me that he didn't have a very high opinion of my husband. And when I started to share with him little by little that I was really struggling in my marriage, my husband was really struggling. He had a lot of problems with depression, alcohol abuse, things like that made his life really difficult. And so he would always jump in. My narc would say, well, it's not because of, any of those things. It's really just he was the wrong guy for you. He's not me. I'm the one who understands your greatness. He's seeing me, he's describing me as this talented designer, and I'm just like, I didn't even really know you thought that of me. You always treated me like I didn't matter. I didn't realize you had so much respect for me and you thought I was so special. And he would say, oh yes, you're so talented. You're the most talented designer that I've met in the States. And he's just not the right guy for you. He doesn't understand you the way I do. So he was kind of trying to insert himself in the cracks of the marriage. And at that point, it was a really vulnerable marriage. And I was feeling like, oh my gosh, my professional life is soaring, my personal life is falling apart, and here's the person who says he's the answer to all of those problems in one package. It was obviously a little too good to be true. So he would say things like, someday when we're not married to the wrong people, someday we could be together. I would make a great dad. I would always, do the kind of things that your husband doesn't remember to do or doesn't think to do because he doesn't know you like I do. We could work together. We could launch the most amazing firm. We would kill it. We would, crush all the competition. It would be amazing if we were doing life and we were doing business full time. That's the way it was meant to be. And those were the things that snuck into my ears, and it started to actually somehow make sense, and I latched onto it like I was clutching a life raft.
And as far as love bombing and flattery, like all of those things, hot, cold, push and pull, like reinforcements, future faking, grandiose statements. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So the way that these conversations would go is one moment he would be painting these beautiful pictures of how life could be if we were together, or he'd be saying sweet things like, I missed you today. I wish you were with me. If you were here, everything would feel like life made sense. He would send me songs to listen to. He would talk about wanting and needing me so much, and then the next minute he would go quiet. I wouldn't hear from him. He would go cold. I would reciprocate in some way. I would say I missed you too, and all of a sudden he would go cold, and I wouldn't understand what that was all about. I wouldn't know what I did wrong. And sometimes when he would get into one of his downward cycles where my narc ex was miserable and depressed and in a dark mood, then he would go on a self-destructive spin, and he would say terrible things about himself, waiting for me to rush in to correct him. So there was a lot of, if he was setting the tempo of our conversations. Sometimes he wanted to pull loving words out of me, and so he would ask me for confirmation. Do you think I'm attractive? Do you think I'm sexy? Do you think I'm smart? And of course I would say, well, of course you are. And other times he would say, I think that, you're wonderful, but you have to stop doing this, or you do way too much of that. And then I noticed also that more and more of our texts were, tell me the details of what you're doing today. How are you doing this? Did you do that? You didn't do it the right way. This is how you need to do it. And at the end of a long line of criticism, he would punctuate it with, it's nice that at least you're cute, or you have one little redeeming quality, and that's why I love you. And you're lucky I put up with this. So there was a kind of I would get a little bit of what I was craving, that approval, and then he would take it back away. And he would insert a bunch of, stuff that would make me feel bad again.
So during this beginning part where, you're being devalued early on here, even in the love bombing and the trust building stage. You're getting these positive things that are going on and then these negative statements. Are you confused about it, or are you like, this guy likes me, or what are you feeling here? Like, do you think he likes you? What's going on? Or do you think he's like, this is who he is, this is what he does, I'll deal with it?
I think that I'm determined that I'm going to somehow figure this guy out. He doesn't make any sense to me. I've never been with someone who is so all over the place, and this hot and cold and back and forth just, it doesn't make sense to me. It's outside of my experience, but I'm determined that I'm going to find a way to figure this puzzle out, and I'm going to ride this roller coaster, and I'm going to somehow take it to the destination that looks like the fairy tale that I fell in love with for my life. This world where it was going to be, the two sides of the same coin finally together, and we were going to be able to do these amazing things, was so attractive. And I thought, okay, I don't know what's going on right now. Sometimes I feel like you love me. Sometimes I feel like you hate me. Sometimes I feel like you think I'm garbage. But you always come back. You're never satisfied. You're always here. And I think that I'd never received the amount of attention that I was getting from him either. I think there were days when I would get 50, 60, maybe even 100 text messages a day from him. And,
sorry to interrupt you here, but I'm a little bit confused, and maybe if I'm confused, maybe the audience might be confused. So I just want to clear some stuff up. So, like right now, I'm as a listener, I'm having a hard time understanding like why you like him, why you've bought into him. I understand there are some things there that he's saying these things to you, but as far as like the love stuff of like how he's kind of like he's doing this and he's doing this and it's bringing me in further and bringing me in further and bringing me in further.
So you want to hear about the things I liked about him, the things that drew me in?
Yeah, like it's because, as far as storytelling goes, we want to hear this is why I'm here. This is why I'm hooked. So when we're already hearing about the devaluation part, before we, because we're hearing about devaluation right now, and I think the confusing part for me is like I don't even know that you're hooked right now. So, or like what has gotten you to like him to even deal with the devaluation, if that makes sense. Because does this devaluation start right away?
Yeah, and I think it starts. I mean, I'm starting from a place of devaluation when I didn't really think that he liked me at all, and in fact, he seemed to avoid me. And I figured, well, he doesn't bother with me because I'm not an elite designer like him. He thinks he's too good for me. So when he started showing me attention, it was almost like, oh wow, like getting attention from somebody that you think is above your league, out of your league, and he, kind of felt he always moves through the world as if everybody is kind of he's sort of out of everybody's league. So that was kind of present from the beginning, if I'm being honest. What wasn't really present until I started getting hooked was that like, well, no, actually, it's a big secret, but I do like you, that type of thing, and this is why it was so attractive to me is because, well, wow, I really thought I wasn't likable. So I respected, I put him on a pedestal, he put himself on a pedestal, and I just thought, oh my gosh, why is he talking to me? I'm flattered. I'm completely surprised that he's interested in me.
And that there was enough of a hook for you to, at that point, you're already in. Like that is like seal the deal for you right there because you respected him so much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it sounds pitiful, but that is exactly
Okay.
what got me.
So you had him on a pedestal. He had you idealized as far as what, you know, his belief in you or his projection of what he wanted you to be. And he's, you know, so you already know he's this grandiose type of person. And that's okay with you.
Yeah, I think I knew I'm really good at worshiping at other people's pedestals, I guess, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't hard for me to accept that he was this incredible, amazing, grandiose designer way above my league. I accepted that as fact pretty quickly. And then when he started showing me attention, I thought, oh my gosh, why is he even bothering? Like with a small little person like me. In my mind, I was not a peer. And then when he started showing me attention, and then he actually started to tell me that he thought I was a really great designer, that he actually thought I was really, really special. It was like I thought I was dreaming. I thought, oh my God, this person I've idolized is showing me attention. That's crazy. Like, does that mean that I'm actually as good as he is? Like, that's impossible, is it? I was completely flattered by his attention. I thought he was way out of my league.
So everything from your childhood has led up to this point and is really controlling your whole entire belief system about who you are. Your whole worth, your self-worth has been put on trial your whole entire life. And here's now someone who's seeing your worthiness.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And now you really feel like you are worth something. And this is really from someone you respected. And that is massive for you. And then all of a sudden, without you even knowing, you're now taking your self-worth and putting it into someone else's hands. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly fair to say. Okay. It's exactly what it's doing, and it felt like such a relief. It felt like somebody else had the steering wheel. You know, I was so afraid that I was going to drive my life and my self-worth like off the tracks because I just was so worried I was going to not measure up in life. And here's this guy that I just think the sun, you know, rises and sets with him. I think he's amazing. I idolize him in a lot of ways. And all of a sudden, like, he's saying I'm good enough to be tapped on the shoulder. He wants to hitch his wagon to mine, and that's just unbelievable. And I'm so happy to hand him the keys to my life because I'm thinking, wow, it's in better hands now.
So, you know, at this point, you're cooked. Like, very, very early on, you are cooked. He has you. And
oh, yeah.
From this point, you know, for everyone listening, your marriage from here is going to really fall apart, and you are going to, you know, eventually start a relationship with this person, and he's devaluing you at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you're getting a push and pull, but you know, you're already into, like, you're already bought in. So this push and pull is just gonna be part of your life.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by it when it happens because, you know, I always remember he would say things to me that sounded so familiar because they were the very same things that I would say to myself. The criticisms that, you know, would run in my head in the background that I would tell myself, you know, you're not good enough. You know, you're this, you're that. There's such a negative self-talk that I have always kind of had in the background. And when he would say those things, it would be like, oh, I feel seen, you know? I mean, it wasn't like he was insulting me. It was like he knew the truth, that I really wasn't good enough. And that was my big secret because I was having all this outside success. My design firm was flourishing. People were publishing my work. My star was supposedly rising. But inside, I felt like such an imposter. And I knew everything that was imperfect about me, and so did he. And he would call it out. And not only would he call it out, but he would have a solution. And so he would have a reason that he could fix it, or that I needed him because I was so, all these
Okay,
other things.
I get it now. You are in a spot here where you respect him so much and his opinion because he can see you for what is actually going on, that you are going to listen to everything and be like, yes, he's right.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Now we're. I don't know what we're going to keep in here, but I'm going to leave this in. Everyone who's listening, I've been trying to figure out what was been going on to like really hammer down, really what's making you tick here, and this is really strong, and. You're not just in here. You're really deep in. This is a really bad spot to be in. Having your worth in someone's hands like this, where you truly believe that they have your best interest at heart, or not just that they're so smart that I should just listen to them because I'm so tired of always trying to be perfect. I just want someone to do it for me. It's a real bad spot to be in.
Yeah, and it wasn't, it was like a foregone conclusion that I knew I was going to fail. And so to be able to trust somebody else with everything was such a relief, because I was figuring he's not going to be as likely to fail at my life as I would be.
How we talked before at the beginning where you said, sometimes we have a conventional stories and how we do things in an unconventional. This is going to be one of those unconventional ones, I think.
Well,
you predicted it.
I figured you'd probably have to help me out here.
So from this point, you eventually sleep with him, and you're still married at the time. So can you kind of discuss what happened there? Obviously, guilt,
huge guilt,
and STDs.
Yeah, I mean, I was so ashamed that I had fallen so far as to have a physical affair that I'd never thought I was capable of doing, just with my morality, and my perfection attempt at life. I just thought this was impossible for me, and yet here I was. And then the secondary effect was I get an STD, and I'm so ashamed and so horrified. I can't even conceive of being able to show that shame to my husband, so we end it, and I don't ever tell him the deep, dark secret of my shame, how deep it goes. And I also just feel so worthless. I feel so disgusting on every level. So it's, and now, there's no second relationship, so I'm expecting my narc to sail in and to take charge and to fix everything, because he seemed so interested in doing just that right up until he had the opportunity to actually sail in and do anything. And then he, of course, he pulls back, and he's like, oh, now you're available. Oh, now you're all alone, and now you need me. Maybe I'm going to pull back, and I'm too busy, and I can't come there, and I'm backing away. And so that begins the next chapter, and the next chapter is really one where we're working alongside each other in the firm that I've created. He's a full-time employee, but he's not giving me what I'm wanting, which is a relationship. I've lost my marriage. I've lost my self-respect in a lot of ways in the process, and I'm thinking, I don't understand. I fell in love with this image of the life we were going to have together. Where are you? You're working with me, but you're working from states away, hours away. You're not with me. You're not in my life. We're doing this long distance, and this is going on for, I think it was about 2 years. And I'm taking this to mean that I'm not good enough for him to really pick for his partner in all ways after all. And I'm just trying to change his mind. I'm trying to make him happy. I'm trying everything. And I'm hating myself more in the process. his love bombing has gone way down. His criticism has gone way up, and so I'm getting such constant feedback on all of my problems, my supposed weaknesses, the daily things I'm doing wrong with the business in his mind, or doing wrong personally. He's telling me, you should dress different. You shouldn't look the way you do. You shouldn't work the way you do. And even though I would call myself a feminist, even though I'm well educated, I just have such low self-worth that I believe him. And I believe that he's saying this, as he would put it, because he wants to help. And yeah, I'm sinking, and I'm sinking, and I'm sinking. And the low point comes when his sneaking around and his shady behavior that I've picked up on along the way. The phone was always face down on the table. He was always missing. He was always not there. And my suspicions are, get higher. I'm checking his phone. I'm feeling crappy about doing that. But I'm doing it because I don't trust him. Something in my gut is telling me something's not right. Even though I believe everything he says to be true about me and about everything, I feel unsettled. And that's when I discover that I'm not alone. And my narc, who I thought was my, knight in shining armor, was actually involved in not just my relationship with him, which I thought it was the only one he was having, but he's also actively married. His wife doesn't realize that their marriage is over. And he's also carrying on multiple other relationships as well. He's got a full-time relationship with a colleague and friend of mine that's been going on even longer than I've been in his life. Years and years. And apparently his role in the end of her marriage was very similar story to mine, as well as many other casual partners. So this guy has been juggling many women, 3 very full-time women, myself, my friend, and his wife. And then he's also got, girls at bars and that he meets and whatever. And this just blows my world apart.
So it blows your...
And that's the end of chapter 1.
Okay, so that's the end of chapter 1. So it blows your world apart, and he's still working for you. What happens from here?
Yeah, so he's working for me. He's completely entrenched in my fledgling company, and he's in control of a lot of the projects that we're working on. My clients have relationships with him. There's a lot of professional and legal entanglements that make this explosion in my personal life, this devastating blow, something that I have to try to compartmentalize, because I'm terrified that if I blow up my professional life by removing him, I feel like I'm in a catch-22. I feel like I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. What do I do? I'm trapped. I feel so trapped. And it kills me in retrospect to think of myself here, because I just want to go back in time and shake myself. I wish I had known then what I know now. This is all new to me. I don't have a word for narcissism. I don't know anything about this type of abuse. I have no idea what's happened to me, and I'm so in the thick of it. And so I'm thinking, well, I'm bound by responsibilities here. I revert to my training of being the helper, being the cheerleader, the person who takes care of everybody. And now I'm more worried. I choose to be more worried about everybody else. My the other employees around in the company. Now there's, 5 of us or so. Everybody's going to be affected if I remove this guy. I'm thinking about my clients. My clients are really going to be suffering if I remove this guy. Thinking about, the legal implications. My business could be in trouble. And I'm also responsible for people's, livelihoods. So I'm feeling like I don't know how I can extricate him. He's so essential. Without him, I still fully believe that my business will fail, and everybody who depends on it and they're feeding their families from it will fail with me. And I feel like I can't do that. I can't do that to them. And I'm also thinking about my friend who still doesn't know that she's in a relationship with this person. And I'm thinking about his wife who, doesn't know what he's up to too. And I'm worrying about them. My reaction to all this is to just sink myself into a puddle of worrying about everybody else. And so he convinces me. He decides, once the jig is up and the curtain's been pulled back and he's been found out, he starts to bargain with me, and he starts to he's decided that his position in the company is very important to him. He wants to maintain that. So he manipulates my view of this situation, and he says, we can work together. We can make this work. I'm not going to abandon your clients. I'm not going to abandon your business. I'm not going to watch it fail. Highlighting, of course, that he believes that that's what will exactly happen if he's not a part of it. And then he also plays upon my guilt, my readiness to accept guilt by saying, really, I feel terrible about this. I feel terrible about hurting you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll never do something like this again. And I've ended it with my, other girlfriend who's a friend of mine as well. I've ended it with her. I promise I'll never bother her again. She doesn't need to go through the pain of hearing all the details. Please don't tell her. She's had so many struggles. She couldn't handle it. And then he goes on and says similar things about his wife. I promise that I won't do anything like this again. Please let me make it right. Please protect the people that don't deserve to have the pain put upon them of knowing what you know. I'm going to do right by this situation if you'll just give me the chance. And so I choose to trust him, and I choose to hope that by keeping the secret of what's happened and by protecting, everybody else from the truth, so to speak, I feel I allow myself to be convinced that I'm doing the right thing. And so that's what I do. I keep my silence, and we work together. And every single day, I feel like it kills me that this is the situation I'm in.
He's really good.
Yeah, he is. And, my friend is also still working with me, and so I'm confronted by all sorts of reminders on a daily basis of this pain, but I feel like I'm in a little corner of forced silence. And I've trapped myself there. I've allowed myself to be trapped
hit you in all of your spots, and he knew and he knew exactly where to go. I mean,
yeah, he's really good.
He was really smooth,
good.
real smooth. He got you.
He is.
That was like, for him, that was nothing. He had you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so it's in this dark period when I'm now I'm learning the word depression. I'm myself in the first the first long dark valley of depression myself, and I'm working incredibly long hours, and I'm devoting myself to keeping the business going. He's in it. I'm still trying to juggle all of this and make sense of it. And in walks, Narc 2. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this except to say that the second narcissist walks into my life at this moment when I feel like my self-worth is in the gutter and I feel so alone and nobody can know the load that I'm carrying because I'm trying to protect everybody else.
So essentially, just to explain to people, right here, you're broken up with narcissist number 1. A new guy comes into your life. You start dating him, and you're dating him. You're already at a real low. You're dealing with this other stuff on a day-to-day basis. You're feeling terrible about everything. And now here comes this other guy into your life, which is just going to make your life a little bit worse for about a year. Yeah.
And, he hooks me the same way. I guess, he figures out my number 2, and he, I start out, I find him the same way. It's a professional conference. We meet, and I'm looking up to him again. He's like Narc 1. Narc 2 is also 10 years older, further along in his career. He's the, splashy, designer guy that everybody respects and I think is way outside my league. and he turns his attention towards me unexpectedly, and I'm like, what is this? Maybe he wants to be a mentor. Maybe he wants to be a friend. That's so cool. I can't believe he's, tapping me on the shoulder. That's crazy. It's exactly the same theme, but this guy presents in a completely different way. His personality is different. He doesn't have the combative kind of beat you down, make you feel bad about yourself technique. He has the seductive, lovely language, really sexy, really. He spins this softer tale that, still putting me up on that pedestal with him. Oh my God, you're amazing. You're a fantasy version of yourself. But he's just dressed in different clothing, and it feels so different that I'm thinking for sure this time this one is different. But he was not. And after a year, you break up, and now you find yourself back eventually into a relationship again with narcissist number 1. So how did that happen? Yeah. So,
and I guess during that time, did narcissist number 1 ever make comments about the current guy you were dating to try and get you back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He started playing the same game that he did when I was married. Whatever guy in my life, he's definitely not good enough. So he's going to make snide comments about the guy that's in my life, even though he doesn't have the right to say anything, and I'll tell him so. The fact that we're working together every day, he'll still sneak in those pot shots at my relationship. Just the fact that I have one, and he just can't stand it, and he has to take digs at the other guy. He even reaches out to try to sabotage the relationship, reaching out to the new guy and saying, you shouldn't want to be with her. She's no good. Just doing anything he can. He's desperate to sabotage it. But eventually the relationship ends for other reasons, and I feel discarded, and I am out in nowhere land. Narc 2 is tired of me. The fantasy is over. I've outlived my usefulness to him. And so just like that, I'm gone. I'm out, kicked out of the kingdom, and I feel so rejected, and I feel even worse than I did at the end of my relationship with Narc 1. I'm thinking, oh my God, twice now I've been thinking this was the saving of my life. This person was extending their hand, and I was going to be good enough finally. And twice now I've been, felt the opposite. I felt completely gutted at the end of these relationships. So I'm in that miserable state when Narc 1 starts singing his song again. He sees the end of that second relationship. Finally, competition's out of the way. He sails back in. He said, I'm still working with him every day. And he's saying, oh my, I've changed so much since years ago when we were together. I made so many mistakes that I would never repeat. If you give me another chance, I'll do anything differently. It will be so different this time. And he promises, and I am so desperate for that story to be true that I give him the chance, and we resume a relationship. And this is at this point in time, this is when he feels the most powerful. He just got me again, and now he's fully back in the driver's seat. He doesn't just have control over my business life through his, his way of making himself the center of everything. He's already recruited all the employees that work for me. He's already created a bunch of little flying monkeys, as people call them, people that are big fans of his. They think he's the funniest. They think he's the smartest. They think he's the best. And he's developing these relationships, and he's always digging at me in the process. So he's driving a wedge between myself and my staff, and basically undermining my reputation as much as he can, so that his place as the superior person in my own business can be uncontested. So
he's firmly in control of your personal life and your professional life here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is your self-esteem at its worst ever right here at this point?
Yep, I remember breaking down into tears in my office, and at one point in time I turned to my office manager, who at that point was pretty much there from the beginning with me. She'd been working with me at that time for about 5-6 years. And I turned to her and I said, would this place be better off if I just stepped away? Like, would it be better off without me? And I really meant it. I was asking the question because I believed that it must be true. And I was trying to do what was right for everybody. And I was trying to be brave enough to ask that question, suspecting that the answer was yes, we'd be better off if you would step away. And that was the low point, definitely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
As far as friends or close people you are close to in any sort of way, are you able to discuss what's going on with them, or are you too afraid to?
One of the things that I remember is that every time someone would overhear a conversation on the phone between myself and my narc, they would say things, whether they were a stranger or whether they were someone that knew me well, like a friend, part of my family. They would say, "Who are you talking to?" And it would just blow their mind. If they even heard a fragment of the conversation, they would say, "What?" Because they saw my demeanor completely change, I think, from what they knew to a different version of me. I guess very different energy from me. And I guess it was just so far outside of what they understood. And they would hear snippets of his end of the conversation and it'd say, "What? Who is that? Why do you even talk to that person?" And I would say, "Well, he's my lead designer," or whatever. And I would make excuses and I would try to play it down because they were so incredulous that at the way I was being spoken to, they couldn't understand, why would you put up with that? And so I was too ashamed to admit, not only did I put up with it, but I believed it. And I thought that actually he's the only person that really knew me, that really knew the real me, that he was actually the one who understood me. And so I didn't share a lot with my family and my friends. I was editing my life because I think it was too painful to show them that side of things. And admitting the full story would mean answering the question of why you put up with it. And I think in my mind the answer was because I need him and he's right. And I'm dependent. If it wasn't for him, I would be a mess. I would literally already have failed. And you guys just don't know it because you don't see behind the scenes. You don't really know me, and you don't know how big a failure I am.
So your catch-22 was the problem is the solution, and the solution is the problem. Yeah,
and so I definitely experienced a shrinking world because my relationships with my family and friends were affected. I think when you stop sharing with people, they stop feeling as close to you, and they don't know how to support you and how to feel like they want to in your life. And so he became everything for me. He was the only person that really knew this enormous part of my life because I wasn't sharing it with anyone else.
And do you feel that the only person that could fix your pain was him?
I felt like he was not interested in fixing my pain. I felt like it was my responsibility to fix all the things wrong with me, and then my pain would end. My pain would be over when I stopped failing so much. And, of course, that was defined by how much he thought I was failing. So he was in control of that.
You were really turned in all directions.
Yeah, for sure.
That's tough. That's really tough to navigate. Like, obviously you get out of here and out of the situation, but, to navigate those waters and how turned around you were and all the confusion, your worth not being in your hands and how much control this person had, not a good spot to be in and you got out, and you should be proud of yourself. I'm getting ahead of myself, but you got really entrenched in there, and you should be proud. I'm just saying.
No, thanks. Yeah, it was. I really bought into it because it was perfectly tailored to, like you said, he found all of those buttons to push that. That I left those doors wide open. Those paths to capitalize on those vulnerabilities. And
if you ever read if you ever read the human maggot, if you,
I think I lived that.
If you ever read the human magnet syndrome, you two together, you guys were the perfect magnet match.
Exactly. And I think you just hit on the things that I've been thinking about the most recently. So I want to get back to that magnet thing at the end, if you remind me.
Okay.
So just to catch you up with the end of the second chapter is, 2 more years of this, and my self-worth just keeps getting beaten every week. This catches us up to basically the second finding out that behind the curtain, the promises that were made, the future that he promised was empty, because he was still up to his own old tricks. He was still doing all the things that he was doing the first time, the cheating, the lying. Everything was repeating itself. The cycle had started up again, and it actually, it had never ended. I had fooled myself into thinking that he was capable of change, but he had never changed. So the relationships with his wife have still never ended. The relationship with his girlfriend / my friend had never ended. And this was all possible because he's still living out of state at this time. He's coming in to see me a week or two at a time, then he's flying back home. So he can do what he wants over there, and he can tell me whatever he wants to tell me about where he is, and I'm taking him at his word. And at one point, what was really happening is I was flying in to see him from time to time, and I'd fly out, and my friend, the other girlfriend, would show up the following week. And, I remember her telling me later that when I put up a Christmas tree in his house just before Christmas that last year. I actually purchased it and ordered it and all the stuff and put it up by myself. He didn't help me at all. I did the whole thing. And this was my big surprise because I wanted to help him make his house feel more like home. He had a way of kind of pulling these favors out of you. Oh, my house doesn't feel homely like yours does. And if only I had decorations. He would always just throw these little fishing lines out, manipulative kind of needs that said, oh, look over here, I have a need that you can fix for me. And then I would rush at the suggestion. It wouldn't take much suggestion. I would just think I was being thoughtful and generous, and I'd just rush to do it. So there I am, putting the tree together, making it beautiful. And the very next week, his girlfriend's visiting, and he's telling the girlfriend how hard he worked putting up this Christmas tree. And, of course, that's a complete lie because he never touched it. But it was just a really kind of crystallized example to me of the absurd reality I was living in. I was literally living in like a Lifetime bad movie, where you're like, how could she ever not realize that the man she's married to is married to 2 other women? That's the kind of life I was living, and I had no idea because I allowed myself to believe what he told me. And I, as much as I complained about him not being a full-time presence in my life, I just always fell for the reasons he gave me. I can't sell my house. We're doing this long distance. We said, all these reasons. And so that's how we pulled it off. So I finally find out it's never changed. I'm still in this triangle, crazy star. I don't know how many points of this triangle there are because there's lots of people in his life. He's desperate for attention, and no one woman is ever, going to give him enough. And when I find this out, I'm just... It blows my mind. Again, I thought my mind was already blown. It's blown even more. But this time is different. This time, unlike the first time, I'm not going to fall for his story about how I'm protecting people by being quiet. and sparing them from the pain that I had to go through the first time by realizing the depths of his deception. This time I realized the only way that I'm going to help anybody is by making sure that they know exactly what kind of a life they're living. And so I take a moment, and I'm still, very entrenched with this person in business. So any move I make is going to cost me dearly, no matter what. It's going to cost me financially. It's going to cost me in terms of political capital with my clients and my coworkers and everything. But I now know there's nothing that is going to stop me from getting out from under this. This is too much even for me with no self-esteem. I'm thinking, nope, there's this one little shred in there that's still battling for myself. And I know that something has to be done. So I take a moment, I figure out my plan, and I decide that it's about a week or 2 weeks that it's coming up. We're going to have this business trip together, and it's my chance. He's going to be outside of my office. He's going to be away from my people. He's also not going to be in my house where I don't feel safe, because there's been some times when he hasn't been outright physically abusive and hit me, but he's been threatening and he's been out of control. And I just don't want him in my house. I'm not feeling safe to unmask him the second time without being safe. So I find my moment. We're on a business trip out of town, and I decide that I'm going to let my friend know what's going on. So I use a tape recorder on my cell phone. And I do this because I want to have a conversation with him where he acknowledges the timeline of our relationship. And I want to record us talking in the car as we're driving to this, business destination. Because if I don't record this, I feel like nobody's going to believe me. Nobody else in his life, nobody else that's been on the receiving end of his manipulations and his lies is ever going to believe anything I would say. He'll have an excuse. He'll tell them I'm crazy. He'll tell them I'm lying, whatever. I know how he works, and I know how convincing he is. So I'm saying to myself, I'm recording this. And so we do. I take him, we have a discussion in the car where I'm telling him a lot of things that bother me about our relationship, and I'm going backwards in time, and I'm basically entrapping him into admitting the truth of our relationship and all the years and all the things that have gone on, at least on a high level. And I end the conversation, I save the recording, and I email it to my friend. And I do this knowing that we can confront him together in a safe space. She's going to be, available and processing this information at the same time that that I'm out from my normal environment. He's away from our normal environment, and I feel safe enough to kind of wave a red flag in front of the bull, because I know that there's going to be a lot of anger that comes from him when I do this. And so I send the recording. My friend listens to it. She calls me the next morning. We don't say much to each other. I think she's still reeling because she is invested. I think I'm 5 years in at this time. She's 7 years in. She's got a small child. She's got a lot to process in that moment. But I asked her, do you want to say anything to him? She said yes. So I call her on the phone without him realizing it. I walk in to the hotel lobby where we're both staying. And again, I'm choosing my moment. I want it to be in a public place where I feel safe. And I said, on the phone. And she knows everything now. And she has something to say. And sorry, I know I mentioned her name. You'll have to take that out.
Yep.
But she says, hello. She pretty much only manages hello. And he runs out of the room. He can't even be. I was shocked that he just ran away like a little kid. He just ran. And at that point, I left the hotel and I drove to his wife's house. We were actually, the business trip happened to be located in the same city that she lives. And I knew where she lived, and I knew that I would be able to reach her before he did. And I slipped a little note through her mail slot. She's never met me, but I felt compelled to apologize to her and to confess that I'd been complicit in this massive deception of years, and to let her know that I was so sorry, that I didn't realize the truth of their relationship, and that there were others. And I shared with her, as I shared with my friend, that, you know, physically speaking, he'd given me an illness, and that I wanted them to be able to know that this is possible for them too. And so in that moment, in that big dramatic arc of the day, I was blowing up a couple people's lives, and I felt tremendous responsibility and guilt. And I also felt like it was the only and necessary thing to do, because there was this runaway train, and he was running people over, and nobody knew it. And I needed to shine a light on it so that all of us could hopefully move forward someday. And that was the end of the relationship with him.
And did you ever speak to the wife, or did she ever get into contact with you?
She did not, and I'm sure she has her reasons, and that's okay. I know she received the message, and I know at least she knows the truth of what went on from at least my perspective.
So at that point, you never see him again, and you fire him from your company?
So I never get that clean of a break professionally. I'm trying to keep things out of the office, while I'm also trying to extricate him from my business life. I think I made the decision in that moment that I first needed to clean up my personal life and make sure the other women that were involved knew what they were involved in. And then I would just pick up the pieces of whatever happened with the professional life. I was surprised that he didn't immediately evaporate from my work life as well. I thought that he would probably just disappear, or he would, launch an incredibly vicious campaign. I think he chose the path that he looked at his options, and he chose the path that he wanted to continue the professional relationship from afar. And I was trying to do it. I was trying to remove him in the least painful way possible from my professional life. So I was backing away slowly. So I sort of would describe it as a slow ramping down of his position until eventually he was gone. But it took months where we were still working together professionally. So I guess I had gotten so compartmentalized. I had practiced that for years. And the fact that I had just suffered a second personal devastation still didn't take away my ability to have this dual life where I was pretending that I wasn't bleeding over here, and I was trying to put a good face on over there. So it took a few more, probably a good 6 months to get him out of my professional life.
And did you go to a professional to discuss how to do the unwinding, or did you figure it out by yourself?
I figured that part out by myself, but I did start therapy, and I've been seeing a therapist every week, and I'm lucky to be in the position to do that. But the logistics of getting him out of my work life were something that I navigated on my own. I think what she was trying to help me with, and still does help me with, is trying to get him out of my head, because his voice was so enmeshed with my own self-critical voice, and still is. I still hear his voice, even though I haven't physically spoken to him in almost 9 months. I still hear it all the time, every day, because it says the same things that I want to say to myself about myself. I have to keep catching myself when I do it. So she's helping me with that, and I'm making progress with that now. And, trying to live a more sober life from his attention and his reinforcement.
And when it comes to, getting him out of your life completely, has he completely left your life? Or does he still try and get a hold of you?
Yeah. So, last November, I formally asked him to stop contacting me. And he's ignored it ever since. I've asked my attorney to write letters. I've at times, had to file for restraining orders, things like that. But the contact request, the attempts at contact have honestly never stopped. I just received a piece of mail from him last week. So despite 9 months of zero response, except through an attorney, twice. He's received attention twice through my attorney when necessary. But other than that, no response whatsoever from me. But he would call on an unknown number. So even if I blocked his number in my cell phone, he'd call on the unknown blocked number. He would leave. Sometimes he would call, in the first few months of no contact, he would call sometimes 12, 15 times a day or all night and leave, rambling apology messages. He would talk to me about how miserably sorry he was, how much of a fool he was, how he would never make the same mistakes again. He has still done all of the same things that he always has done in an attempt to reel me back in. And, he's even resuscitated the love bombing again and started with the compliments again that were so rare when we were actually in a relationship, so to speak. That was when I got less of them. But, when I would walk away from him and reclaim myself, all of a sudden my value would go back up, and I really believe that he only wants what he can't have, so I don't know that he'll ever stop trying to reach out.
So how long has it been since you've gone completely no contact?
So it's been since November 14th
and
of last year.
Do you still struggle with wanting to contact him? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. That's a really important question. And I'm glad you asked because in some ways I'm freer than I've ever been. My life is more peaceful. I don't have that constant negative voice in my head physically the way on the phone from him. I still have to deal with my own version of that, but he's no longer a presence. But I definitely notice my brain still reaching back for the familiar, and he did ingrain himself so much into my life in every area of my life, my personal life, my professional life, that there is that trauma bond that people talk about, and it's definitely real for me. I know that it was such a strong drug to me in a lot of ways, this constant need to try to please him, to try to find the way to get it right this time. And he just felt, he really enmeshed his life with mine. I've heard people talk about how narcissists kind of want to just absorb your personality and your spirit and become one with you in a way and co-opt your personality. And that's the way it felt. And it felt so like he was so close and in there, way down, dug down really deep. He just dug. I feel like I still reach for that sometimes, even though I haven't responded and I've stayed away from him. It has taken a lot of effort, and there have been so many times when I've been tempted, so many times when I've heard that voicemail that says all the right things, or I've read that card that I shouldn't have read. I should have just burned it when I received it, but I read it anyway. And that's the addict in me that still craves this poisonous drug of the impossible, the impossible reach for me is pleasing somebody that can't be pleased. And that's the thing that keeps gnawing at me sometimes when I'm having a weak moment. And I think, honestly, that, as I said to you when I wrote in, listening to podcasts like this that you guys produce has really helped me in those moments. I'll throw a podcast on like yours, or I'll listen to other voices on this narcissism issue, and I educate myself. I really dug into learning. That was my recovery strategy, was I want to learn everything there is to know about what happened to me, because I'd never even heard of this when it happened. And so that's the strategy. But yes, to answer your question, every single day it's still a battle, even though it's 280 something days later. And I would have expected that it would have just gotten easier and easier and easier in a straight, nice, even line. But it has not been like that for me. And so that is something that I think is probably going to be like like any other addiction, something that you kind of always have to be on guard for, because I don't know if I'll ever be completely immune to those kinds of things.
And when it comes to your self-worth and, your perfectionism and fear of failure, with your therapist, how are you working on those things? So if you find another person like this last two guys you have met, that you don't fall into the same trap?
Yeah. So this is where that tie back to that magnetism comes in. I think the more that I learn about narcissism and the pathology of it, and how the dynamics work, the more I realize my energy that I was bringing into my life from my upbringing and my personality, whatever you want to say about how people become the way they are, I've got the same kind of energy imbalance in the opposite way that maybe my narc has, in the sense that both of us are looking to other people to kind of validate ourselves. And for me, I was looking to other people. I wanted to please them. I wanted to look for their approval all the time, and I had a really artificially low self-worth. For him, he had an artificially high self-worth, and he was looking for people to help him make sure that that fantasy reality was true. So he needed to dominate other people. He needed to control other people in order to, make his world make sense. And so it was like a big old magnet pulling us together. And if I change my energy, if I find a way to heal that imbalance where I'm looking at other people all the time and get more centered in how I feel about myself, then I'm not going to make as much of a magnet pull towards me for the people that would seek to dominate me and want to steal that lightning, to make it their own, to co-opt it and to say, oh, I just, conquered I've got a lightning bug in a jar, I don't want to be the lightning bug in somebody's jar again. So I got to change the way that I'm operating so that I don't do that.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And I guess in the last few months, 4 months, I've started to, at least in some of my emails back to people, say to them, because not people who are listening, not every episode we record make it to air. We record a lot of episodes, and a lot of them don't make it to air. Or some of them go to our Patreon, some of them never even go anywhere. And what I have started to say to some people is, if you think that if the show doesn't make it to the main show, the main podcast, that you'll be so upset about it that it'll throw you backwards into whatever stage of healing you're in, then let's not even start the recording process at all. So for you to come on here and sit here with me today and, record and keep your self-worth on your side of the fence, how are you feeling about that? Did that kind of come into any sort of your mind about like, oh, I don't want to be rejected or anything like that? Because it's not it's not rejection, because we have a job to do here as far as like having our audience listen the whole entire way through. We have to put on the most, the easiest, not the easiest to listen to, it's hard to explain, but not entertaining, but ones where people will just listen the whole way. So did that make you nervous?
Yeah, I think for sure it does make you nervous because, at least for myself, I don't feel like I know the things that other people are necessarily needing to hear, what they're looking for, and whether or not I'll be able to offer it. And you want to be helpful. That's my nature, right? I want to be helpful. I want to give people what they want, but you don't really know what they want. It was nerve-wracking, and certainly when I would stumble and get lost somewhere, it would be hard to feel like, oh God, there's me failing at my job, right, for the next 90 minutes. But I think my recovery is about pushing through the fear of failure. And so even if I'm starting to feel that panic of being rejected or not doing something right, I think that's exactly what I need to be doing, is putting myself in places where I don't feel comfortable, but I still do it anyway. And those are really powerful healing opportunities. I know we've all gone through COVID, and we've all, done a lot of hard things during that time. Coming out of it, I challenged myself to mark the end of, the maybe social distancing extremes by saying, okay, I'm going to do something on a bucket list that scares me, but I'm going to do it anyway because I am afraid of failing, but I'm also afraid of not trying, and let me do it so that I can come out the other side and conquer that fear. I did that with scuba diving. I felt completely out of my element. I was sure that I was going to drown, and then, pushing through that fear got me the most beautiful otherworldly experience. And so doing something like this where I feel like I'm out of my element and I'm not doing what I do for a living, I'm not feeling confident, that facing the fear is probably the best strategy for me going forward, so I can try to change that energy and not be a magnet for being a people pleaser forever.
Can I tell you something?
Please do. This
is one of my favorite episodes that I've ever done.
What? No, sir. I thought for sure I was one of your worst.
It has nothing to do with that. We both came here. It's hard to explain, but I think you brought the best out of me today.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you. And likewise, I think I could say the same. There was a moment where things kind of clicked, and I felt safe, and I felt like we were speaking the same language. So thank you for that.
There is this, I'm just going to be really blunt here. There is this documentary that I love called Dogtown and Z-Boys. It's about a skateboard team. And there's this one moment in there where this man who was running this skate team at the time was talking about one of the skaters. And he said, when you watched him skate, this person would, be in the middle of a move and it would be an absolute disaster. And somehow through that disaster, this person made art. And for some reason, I feel like that today, that's our show.
Well, I like that. I will take that as a huge
does that make sense?
And I'm so happy that we made.
I think we were in a trouble spot for a while, and then we just hit it.
Awesome.
Don't you think so?
Well, yes, I would definitely say I feel so, and I'm so happy you feel so as well.
All right. So, before we end off our show today, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for everyone else who's going through the same thing?
Yeah, I do. I think making sense of what's happened is really important. And for me, it's been a strategy of listening to other people's stories, finding the commonality, which your show does a beautiful job of sharing with the world. It's also been peeling back some of the psychology, digging into my own past and figuring out what was going on with me so that I could put it all into context and really reverse engineer my thinking. And so and then once I worked through all the understanding parts, my brain, I hit a little bit of a plateau because my brain felt like it had all the information that it could have, and I just still felt stuck. I still felt like I was in the grieving stage for so much longer than I wanted to be. And I didn't know how to move forward from that. I thought I had all the facts, but I still felt so sad and so empty. And I think that for me, this next chapter of healing is really centering around the emotional changes that come from putting myself out of my comfort zone and teaching myself that I can trust myself again. Because I adopted someone else's version of reality as my truth. That was how my abuse was made possible. And in order to silence his voice in my head, which, as I said, I still hear from time to time, I have to make my own voice much louder than it has ever been inside of me. And so for me, that means pushing myself, challenging myself, patting myself on the back for my wins, recognizing those wins, and really having room in my life for the joy of those everyday victories, the ones that say, oh my gosh, it feels really good to just sit in the sun and to not be productive or helping anybody else right now. Just to be enjoying living, just living, just being here is enough. And I've already done what I needed to do just by showing up. So if anybody else can identify with that, I would just say, keep doing what you can do to move through the stages of grief so you can get to the other side of where I think the peace is waiting. And I know that everybody can do it because I know that nobody thought they would fail more than me. And here I am, and I'm feeling so much better than I did, so keep walking.
Well, Kaya, I am proud of you. You've come a long way. You're going through a lot. You've been through a lot. You're doing the work, and it's not easy to do. You have a lot of work to do, but you're on your way. What you went through, you were in a really, as I said earlier, you were in a really bad spot, and you found yourself here, and you're helping a lot of people today, and you should be really proud of yourself. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me.
Thanks. I don't know if it matters, but you called me Kaya, and you called me just then, and you called me Opal in the beginning.
Oh my God. Kaya was the person that I spoke to 2 hours ago. Did I call you Kaya earlier as well?
No, you called me Opal in the beginning, and then you called me Kaya just then.
Okay, I'll make sure. I'm going to do it again.
Okay.
I can't believe I did that, but now I can. Okay, I'm going to get my composure. Hold on. Whew. Well, Opal. Hold on.
Maybe I need a new name. I don't know.
Well, I think we should just end the show there. So from Opal and not Kaya and I, does that even make sense? We hope you have a good night.